Welcome to my SwiftUI for iOS 17 course. My name is Meng, I'm from designthinking, and I'm really excited to show you how to build stunning apps using Xcode 15, which has a ton of new features, and with SwiftUI you can build for not 5 but 6 platforms, including the new Vision OS. So it's never been a better time to learn SwiftUI, especially if you're a designer or beginner and you want to learn about layout and animations and interactions. So we're going to build a bunch of apps. We're going to start from the ground up, meaning that we're going to learn all the basic techniques for the layout, the visual editor, the previews, how to adapt for different screen size and orientation, as well as dynamic type. We'll learn how to use the new SF Symbol 5 with animated icons in just a few lines of code. We're going to explore the new keyframe animator as well as phase animator. Then there's the new donut charts and the metal shader, which adds really interesting effects to your layout. Now this course is going to be packed with content. We will explore multiple apps and we're going to try to adapt for all of these platforms using the same techniques in SwiftUI. Since Xcode 15 is not released yet, you're going to need to go to developer.apple.com and click on Develop. This is where you're going to find the beta version of Xcode. So we're gonna go to Downloads, then sign in with the developer account, which can be created using your Apple ID. And then you're gonna go to Applications, where you're going to download Xcode 15 beta. Currently, we cannot develop for Vision OS yet, so we're going to start with macOS 14 as well as iOS 17, and this is going to be a very strong foundation for Vision OS. Additionally, you might want to install iOS 17 as well as macOS 14 in order to test for those platforms. Now, the easiest way to download the betas is to run the latest version of iOS 16 or macOS 13.4 and go to System Settings, where you're going to find an option for beta updates. Now you can also download the Restore Images, where you can go to Apple Configurator and then update from there. Once you have Xcode 15 installed, you're going to find this window, and that's where you can create a new project. Before we do that, I highly suggest heading over to the Design tab. This is where you're going to find all the human interface guidelines, but also the Apple design resources. So new this year, you're going to find the Figma version of the iOS 17 UI kit, which is awesome. You're going to find all the elements and the guides and the styles for the colors, material, dynamic type, and safe area. Now you have the templates for iPhone, iPad, and the components that you're going to definitely use when you design for iOS. So instead of creating these from scratch, you're going to be using them, which has variants and all of these options. Now for this course, I include the Figma file, where you're going to find the layouts that we're going to build, the assets, the styles, so for the colors and the text, as well as the app icons. We're going to learn how to use Midjourney to generate these icons, which I'm going to show you how to generate from a prompt, and then we're going to make the necessary edits, and then we're going to export to get the perfect format for the platform that you build for. With this, we're ready to get started. Let's create a new project. And here, you can select the platform that you want to build for. Additionally, you can select multi-platform if you want to have one code base for all of those apps. But we're going to focus on iOS for now, and we're going to select the application. So here, I'm going to click Next. Then the product name is going to be DesignCode or whatever app name that you want to use. You don't need to add app at the end because it's going to do that automatically. Now for the team, you can set it to none, or if you have a developer account, you can connect that. You can also do that later. For the identifier, it's going to be your domain name in reverse. So in my case, I start with IO, then designtcode. For the interface, SwiftUI, language Swift, and later on you can use Swift data. For now, we're going to set it to none so that we can focus on the basics. So click on next and save it somewhere like downloads. And that's it, you have your first iOS app project. At first, we'll want to set the project settings by going to the first option. And here, you want to set your app display name. So this is the name that will appear next to your app icon. So I'll set designtcode. Also important is to set the deployment target. And this definitely depends on what you're developing for. So for example, if you're taking my iOS 16 course, you will have to set to iOS 16. But in this case, we're setting to iOS 17. But in the future, you might get into iOS 18 or 17.5. And therefore, you need to make sure that you have the same deployment target as me to ensure that the code that I share here will continue to work. Let's go back to content view. Now, this is very similar to most Mac applications where you have the navigator on the left side. You're gonna find all your files and the assets and the different tabs for debugging or for committing or searching. This is where you want to always go back to the project navigator, especially when you run into a bug or when you're building an app. And then you can toggle the sidebar for maximum space. You can also play in the simulator. But before that, you might want to select where you want to build. And usually you want to start with the simulator, which is not the iPhone itself, because if you use the iPhone, you're going to need to have a developer account, you're going to need the proper permissions set up. So for now, as a start, you want to select the iPhone 14 or Pro, then you can run the app, and this is where you're going to find the layout that you have in your content view. So you can see here, the content view is the main layout and the main file where you land. Otherwise, you have your designtcode app, which is the root of everything. And this is where you can set up the data and where is the first view. But don't worry, for the first part, we're not going to touch any code, and we're simply going to play with a visual editor and the assets. Now, let me explain to you the inspector. Usually, you want to enable this at the beginning, and this is where you're going to find the different information. But specifically useful is the attributes inspector. Now notice that when you start selecting elements, you're going to see the options for it. This is where we're going to explore a lot deeper later. And before doing that, we're going to head to the assets. This is where we're going to set up the accent color, which is the main color that you're going to see every button to be colored to. And also you have the app icon, which is the icon representing your app. And since last year, we only need a single file with a resolution of 1024 by 1024. From the assets that you downloaded for the course, you're going to find the Figma file, of course, and also the Xcode projects for all the final files and for the course. So for every step, every section, you're going to find the source code for them to help you compare it against your progress. Now, the assets themselves, if you want to skip this part, you can simply drag and drop every folder inside the assets folder. And before doing that, you're going to need to delete these two and then just drag and drop. Now, if you don't want to do that and you want to go step by step as if it was your own app, we're going to go back and then we're going to go through the process of generating your app icon using Midjourney, exporting the assets one by one, and also setting up the colors. So what is Midjourney? Well, this is an AI tool that allows you to generate images using a prompt. You're going to want to create an account. Once you're in, you'll want to go to the newbies room, and this is where you can type. And the command that you're going to use is /imagine and use the prompt. So any prompt can work, except that it's easier to start with one that has already been done. Specifically here, we're going to create an app icon. So beautiful square iOS icon. Then you explain the concept. In this case is storefront. You want the style, flat, subtle gradients, no letters. And you want to use one of the version of Midjourney. And the version 4 is pretty good for designs because they're a little bit more creative, but this will change over time. And you can decide to go with 5.1, which is the newest version, or any version in the future. But if you want to follow exactly what I have, just use the exact prompt, including the version number. So you'll enter that, and you're going to start generating. It's going to take a little bit of time, and voila, it's done. So this is the concept that you're getting, and you can decide to iterate further by generating more concept by clicking on the refresh icon, or if you like one of these, you can click on upscale 1 to 4. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if you like one of these, you want to generate more variation, you will click on V1 to V4. Now you do have a limited number of renders that is free. So if you want to have a paid account, which is something I highly suggest, especially if you're planning to use this a lot, you'll go back to midjourney.com and sign in. And this is where you're going to find all the renders that you have generated so far. Now to subscribe, you're going to go to manage sub, and this is where you're going to find the different plan details. So we have 3 plans. The basic one, which allows you to have a certain amount and no fast generation. A fast generation allows you to do it much quicker, but also you have unlimited generations. So it depends on how much you're using it and how many renders that you're running at the same time. Now, regardless if you have a paid account or not, you're going to be able to save that image and start using it. But with a paid account, you can also reduce all the noise that is here and just add the Midjourney bot to your own server, which is really useful. So once you have your own server, it's going to look a little bit like this, and you have the history. You can also share it with your team, which is really useful. As a side note, we do have a Discord server where I share all my best prompts for generating all sorts of things such as icons, images, and backgrounds. Okay, so once you have the image and the direction that you want, you're pretty happy with the result. It can serve as an inspiration for recreating it in vector yourself manually if you have the skills, or if you have a designer that can do that for you, you can definitely present this as concepts. But otherwise, if it's pretty good, you can always fix them by using Photoshop. So for example, you have some issues here with the letters, with the shapes. So to do that, you're gonna want to download an application such as Pixelmator. And most of these image editor, you're going to find something like a repair tool, or on Photoshop, it's called content aware fill. And you're going to want to patch these like this. And you can change the brush size to make it a little bit more precise, or you can also zoom in a little bit to make it easy to manage. So once you're pretty happy with the patches, you'll want to upscale the quality of the image, especially if you're going to slice this and only take the portion that is for the app icon. So you can use the beta upscale redo using Midjourney, or you can use an AI upscaler tool like the one that I created. And it's fairly easy. It's a Figma plugin. So you're going to select the image and then slash AI upscaler. I'm going to select it. It's a simple window and just apply 2x. It's going to take a little bit of time, and voila, you have your upscaled image. It's a lot sharper and you can use it for your app icon. So I'm going to use the slice tool, which is S, and you want to draw a square by using the shift on your keyboard shortcut. And here you want to set roughly the square size. Note that Midjourney is not always going to create a perfectly square icon and container, so you might want to get creative and sometimes have to redo it from scratch using a plugin such as Remove BG, which removes the background, and then you can put that on a custom background. But essentially you want to set a resolution of 1024 by 1024. So you're gonna export this slice and set it, instead of 1x, it's going to be 1024W, and then you can export that. Now, it's definitely always recommended to try to redraw from scratch. It's going to be a really good practice, and it's not really that hard since the illustrations are fairly easy to replicate, and you can just use vector tools. We do have a course called Design and Prototype Apps with Midjourney, where you're going to learn how to use those concepts and then draw the vector points and set the gradients and then set the resolutions. So the end result ideally should be something like this, which is all vector and text and with infinite zooming because again, it's vector. Now you should definitely read the best practices for your app icons depending on the platform. So you have the macOS icon, the iOS icon, the tvOS, watchOS, and so on. In my case, I have the beta icon, the Mac, and iOS. So let's talk about exporting. Here, you want to export to a PNG. This is if you want to have a full quality, and especially if you want to have alpha opacity, so a transparent background. But otherwise, if you have normal images that serves as a background for your card, for example, then they should be exported at 3x in JPEG. But this definitely depends on your original resolution. So if you plan on using this specific image at 360 by 360, you'll need to export at 3x. But if this original image was already at 2000 by 2000, you might not need to upscale that much. For example, in this design, you have the background that is set at 360 by 360. Then for the iPhone, it has a resolution of 3x, and that's why we're exporting it at this resolution. Now, when you work with glyphs such as icons and logos, you might want to use a different format. If it's SF symbol, you don't have to do that because it's built in Xcode and you can use code for that. But if, for example, you have a custom glyph such as a logo, you will want to export this using either SVG or PDF. Now, the SVG is more universal, meaning that it works best for all platforms, including web and Android. But the PDF renders the effects a little bit differently. So for example, drop shadows, gradients, and so forth can be improved. Once you have your assets, you're going to select them. Once you have your assets, you're going to select them and export all of them at the same time to your folder. So at the end, you're going to have a folders that look like this, like images, which is included in the assets provided. And you can simply drag and drop those images to your assets catalog. Here it's going to be defaulted to 1x, and it's going to scale automatically unless you set those resolution manually. Again, this is a little bit more complex that you will learn with time as a designer. For now, we're going to set the app icon, and we're going to drag and drop the app icon.png, and then we're going to set the accent color. As I mentioned before, this is how your buttons and links will be tinted. So it's important to set a color, otherwise it's going to default to blue. So we're gonna go to the attribute inspector, and you can set a light mode and dark mode. Typically, the light mode is a little bit darker for better contrast, and the color in dark mode is going to be slightly lighter. So we're gonna go to Figma and go to styles. So we have our color styles. We have the colors for the text. So very typical to have black and white for dark mode, and then a slightly different tone of black and white for the secondary color. For the accent color, this is specific to your branding, and this is what we're going to customize. So we're going to use the hex color value, which is very common in the design tool. So copy that and go to Xcode, select the light mode version for the color, and then select the content, set to RGB. And here for the input method, we're going to set 8-bit hexadecimal, and you can paste that color value. Let's do the same thing for dark mode. Then sometimes you want to have a custom background color for your UI. So to set a new color set, right click in this space here and click on color set. Let's name this background color, and I'm going to apply the same colors. Awesome. With this, we're pretty much ready to get started. Now, before we go, I do want to share some of the best resources to learn SwiftUI alongside this course, starting with the developer app. And this is where I'm going to be sharing pretty much a lot of the videos that will be helpful for each of the topic that we will cover. First, you're going to want to head to the App Store, where you're going to search for developer app, and this is available in iOS and macOS, and you're going to find all of the content each year to dive deeper for every topic. Let's not forget that on the developer website, you can go to develop, and specific to SwiftUI, you have a lot of resources. So here you can have sample code from tutorials, and you have a lot of introductions from Apple directly to teach you about SwiftUI and different platforms. Specifically this year, we have the app called Backyard Birds, and they share the entire source code. So if you're someone like me who likes to analyze the source code or the design files, you can download this and take a look at the best practices and the new features in a real multi-platform project. Now, since this year, we have a superpower, and that is ChatGPT. If you don't know what this is a large language model which allows you to ask all types of questions about any topic, and for us, that is SwiftUI. So it has knowledge until 2021, which is plenty for all the things you need to know about SwiftUI and getting started. But specifically for GPT-4, it's even better. And what I suggest is to start with a prompt that sets the stage, which is you're an expert in iOS development, SwiftUI, and you have the best practices. So please provide steps to create a new Xcode project. And then you can ask any question regarding what is missing, what problems that you encounter, what bugs and error codes that you get, and this is going to help you for any of those questions. Now, of course, it's not going to have knowledge of SwiftUI 5. So what you want to do to help is whenever you have a topic in mind is to go to the documentation around that and copy the content for that documentation to give context about the code and the code sample, and then feed that to ChatGPT, and then ask a question about that topic. Likewise, when you run into issues, you can copy and paste the code to ChatGPT and tell it what kind of errors that you're gonna get. So for example, if this code is broken, it's gonna give you a specific error message, and you can copy and paste that error message to ChatGPT, and it's going to try to help you, especially if the code is not new. So for example, the image, text, VStack, it will all understand that. If you want to learn more about GPT-4 and all the techniques involved, all the best prompts to use to learn SwiftUI, we have a course for that, and you can start building apps for both iOS and web. So as you work through this course, you can definitely use the SwiftUI handbook to cover all of those foundational topics, such as how to create a stack, a spacer, how to import images, and they're super short, so very easy to digest. With all this, I think you're in good hands. You have all the resources that will help you, and we're ready to get started and build multiple apps from this course. So in the next section, we're going to cover the basic visual editor. Without writing a single line of code, we're going to build a pretty neat layout. So I'll see you in the next section.